Dr. Gillian Polack is an award-winning Australian speculative fiction writer. She was awarded the 2020 A. Bertram Chandler Award for Lifetime Achievement in Science Fiction. Her most recent novel is The Green Children Help Out. Her novels are science fiction and fantasy, which is odd, for she's an ethno-historian. Gillian, you'd better come in and explain yourself.
Hello. I'm going to give you a reading from The Time of the Ghost, but I'm also going to sneak in something from elsewhere because my Time of the Ghost reading is far too cheerful. It turns out that it is ghostly, but the other one is more ghostly. So let me just get started, and I've got to change my screen because it won't let me read. So I'll be reading from the screen. So this is my favourite scene in Time of the Ghost, so I'll start with that. We're talking about 3 women aged 60 up and a teenager. Here, said Anne, I can see them. There's a whole gang lurking beneath the big tree, just ahead on the right. The big tree was deciduous and the moon shone very clear through its skeleton. Suddenly, Kat didn't like what she saw. Not at all. Anne seemed to know what she was doing. She walked right up to them and towered over them and said, "Get out of here. Get out of Canberra. Get out of Australia." Her voice was very firm. She was very brave. A moment later, she was surrounded by short, jeering, man-like creatures with big eyes and bigger mouths. "Get out of here yourself," one said. "Get and make us." The crowd laughed and chatted and pressed in. The Abbey lovers were short, but they were threatening. Katz took a step back. Mabel took 2 steps back. A couple of little men noticed her. Instantly, half the swarm was around Mabel as well, poking and prodding and pushing. Mabel stepped back until she was pressed into a big letterbox. The jabbering and the hollering and the calling got louder and more vile until even the air sounded crowded. Some of the lubbers started making obscene gestures and calling to their mates what they wanted to do to them, and 1 or 2 started doing more than gesturing. Kate stood there stunned. Her grannies were being attacked by little man-like things. It was indecent. It was wrong. It froze Kat to the spot, silent, hurting. Then, just behind her, to her right, she heard a quiet sob. Lil was crying. Kat lost her temper. "You there." She strode in and poked at one of the lubbers crowded against Mabel. "You think you're so bloody big. Look at you. Tiny. Takes a really small man to say those things to an old woman. Takes an idiot. A real twerp. You think you're an Abbey lubber? You're not a lubber. You're just a lub. Something small and stupid." Kat kept talking. She didn't notice that everyone and everything was watching her and that every single mouth was agape. She was so focused on that one creature and his golem eyes that she couldn't stop herself. At the back of her mind, she heard Lil crying, always. She saw Mabel scared. She saw Anne trapped. "You hurt my grannies. I hurt you. Do you know how many teenagers there are in the city?" Kat flung the words at the crowd of creatures like a challenge. 10 times your number, 100 times, 1,000 times. Every single human aged 13 to 19, every single teenager in this town will stand outside every pub and every bar and every restaurant, and they will watch for you. I won't tell them what to do either. They will know what to do. Teenagers know stuff. Some of them will just stand and look. That night you'll be all grateful. Just a bunch of teenagers standing and looking, standing and looking, standing and looking. Have you ever seen how a teenager can stand and look? It shrinks you inside. It makes you tinier than tiny. But that's not the worst thing that will happen to you. Oh, no. Some of us are old enough to get into bars. Some teenagers drink. And those friends of mine, those drinking age friends, they'll notice you in every bar, in every restaurant, wherever you get your drinks. They'll notice you. They'll look at you and laugh at you and point at you. You won't be able to hide in the darkness, finishing up everyone's leftovers. Everyone will see your dirt and your eyes and your strange mouths. Everyone will know you don't belong here. Everyone will watch and watch and watch until you can never be invisible again. Look at me looking at you. I'm memorizing you. I'm going to go on the internet and tell everyone, Everyone, not just in Canberra, everywhere. Every teenager in the world. And you know what? We don't even have to hate you. We don't need to poke you the way you're poking my oldies. We don't need to say rude things and threaten. We don't need to be obscene. All we have to do is look. And as you can see, that was far too cheerful, so I'm going to finish with a bit from a short story called Passports. It's in a volume called Mountains of the Mind. Christy is visiting an old plantation. It's her very last day in America, and this makes up for the Australian teenagers who are allowed to drink a lot younger than American teenagers. Christy looked back at the house. She thought she saw a shadowy figure in a little window. They hadn't been shown that section. In fact, they'd only climbed as high as the big balcony. The figure waved, maybe at her, maybe at the sad remnants of the other tourists. It pointed across the lawn to the levee. She squinted to get a better view of the upper room, but there was no one at all there now. The lady had to be pointing at something or someone. What was she trying to say? Her feet shifted in the deep grass as Christy decided what to do. In the end, she said to herself, 3 more minutes. I'll check it out. Bridget can wait, just 3 more minutes. Christy heard the sound of a horse-drawn carriage getting closer. You have a great imagination, Christy scolded herself. She ought to get back to the car. They still had to drive through the back blocks of Louisiana, and that had been eerie enough on the way here with all the mangroves and strange little petrol stations and those white alien petrochemical globes growing out of the landscape. A horse neighed, and the carriage sound clattered to a halt. Christy took a deep breath and looked away from the house, towards where the Mississippi hid behind the levee. Instead of the levee rising to the sky and masking the horizon, Christy saw the oaks extended to the waterfront. She wanted to work out the trick of the eye that caused the ground to look flat. She started counting the trees again as she walked through the oak alley to the water. Mr. Glasses shouted something. Christy couldn't hear what he was saying, but she turned and waved politely. I'm just going to the end of the trees, she shouted back. I want to see the water. He started running. Christy shrugged. She'd meet him at the water's edge. A raven flew down from the first oak. It stopped right in front of her. She eyed it. It eyed her. She was spooked. I'm just homesick, she thought. She took out her passport and held it where she could see it. What a stupid thing to do, she told herself. As Christy walked closer and closer to the water, her emotions were odd. First, she felt the weight of time. It trapped her between land and sky. It froze her breath and it froze her body. Everything that she felt was magnified and magnified and more magnified until her feelings and her pain were the only world she experienced. When they unfroze, she started to walk again. She didn't control the direction in which she walked. A sharp blade cut into her soul and loosened it. It wedged itself inside her and levered an opening. Soon the small dislocation she carried with her all day drew her half-frozen body away from the land and the earth and the sky and into another Louisiana. The only words left to Christy were empty. I am empty. She fought the emptiness inside. She fought the emptiness outside. She looked for words. She looked for ideas. All she had was a blankness, one that grew and grew. She looked up at the gentlemen. Their warm oak foliage sheltered her. Numbers help fill emptiness, she thought. She counted the trees again in pairs. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. At 10, the window into her soul opened a little wider. She kept walking and counting. There was safety in walking and counting. There was always safety in numbers. 12, 14, 16, 18. A child's voice filled the void, the sound of a horse in a billiard room, the chatter of French and the warm scent of summer melons. Christy could not stop walking. She wanted to. Defiantly, she held her passport in front of her. 20, 22, 24, she was there. She'd reached the water. The trees no longer protected her, not the live oaks, not the dead oaks. Her passport slipped from her hands. Christy was nowhere, or she was under the levee, caught in time, trapped by the weight of the past. Thank you, everybody.